Yo, so I was just finishing my last Hades run before we go on, and I made a joke saying, "What's the difference between Hades, aka the underworld, right now, and America?" Please do tell me.
I was going to say that in classical literature, the pagan underworld in pretty much every pre-Christian religion was actually peaceful
Hmm.
and not a hellscape.
It was because it was like, okay, listen, life is hard. We recognize that, this mortal existence that you've had to go through is pretty fucking rough, right? You don't have the powers of a god, and life is hard.
Do you
And
though?
so when you die, you should be able to like relax, So like it wasn't it's not this idea of like damnation, like, oh, after you've suffered for an entire lifetime, here's an eternity of suffering.
I
So
also
if you
think
want to know
too, like,
something, go ahead, Scott.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
No,
sorry.
you're good. We just talked at the same time. It's fine.
I honestly also think too, like on top of that, like, but like you were saying, but like to expand on that, like the like morality was different, right? Like we
Yeah.
didn't have like this sort of dualistic morality at the time,
Mm.
where everything sort of, and this is my obviously just my opinion, but this dual moralism, good and bad, right and wrong, it kind of, I don't know. I don't think it never made much sense in my life. You know what I mean? I always feel like, especially as I've gotten older and been through therapy and all this stuff, I tend to think that things are more, in the middle of the road, which I think really aligns itself with um, pre-Christian, or I should say, because it's not just Christianity, because there's also, I believe it's Zoroastrianism, which is where we actually get the dual uh, moral system from.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it aligns itself more with pre-Christian sort of how we align ourselves to animism, and how we align ourselves to the tides of the seasons, and this sort of conceptualizing that we are a part of nature, not just sort of this unwelcomed, or maybe this in our opinion, the superior voyeur
Mm.
to nature, right? We're actually a part of this system as it moves, and what we do affects it, what it does affects us, right? And I think that yeah, it has to do with the morality of the time and the way the ancient people used to think about things, versus how we think of how we again engage with the world around us today as modern people. Blah blah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I rambled.
Um, the thing I was going to shout out is that actually, if it's interesting that we talk about Hades and then the Christian underworld, because the idea of the Christian underworld didn't even exist until Dante's Inferno, which actually lifts a great deal of the underworld from Greek mythology.
Mm.
Well, that's really
Yeah,
Really? I
yeah,
don't
that's what I had
know.
read. I don't have
I
a
don't
source to
know
corroborate it.
why. I don't know why, but I fell in love with Dante's Inferno. I read a translation of it. I still have it. I forget what the exact translation was, but it was just so good. And I just remember just reading this poem from like cover to cover, and I was like, damn, I can see why people like went nuts about this like back when it
It
was
was
written.
also, yeah, it was also very what was the word? Controversial. Like I think it had members of the church in hell or some other stuff like that, because like the author couldn't necessarily take direct open shots at the Catholic Church, but he could do it through talking about um the underworld itself.
Sorry, I was distracted by chat. That's what I was looking at. Lex is in the chat. Heart. Lexa was just
Hi.
saying Sophia is speaking facts.
Also,
um,
weirdly enough, it turns out I beat Hades while we were having this conversation.
I saw you were in that game. You're into it right now.
I mean, just because Hades 2 is coming out soon, and I wanted to go back and make sure I finish this. Um, yeah, and I
Somet-
just got my 10th completion, so that's that
sometimes,
game.
sometimes like if you want to like, sometimes I want to like low key absorb something like I guess sort of magical, right? And so like that's where I usually
Hmm.
like will go to like video games. to get that. Like there's so many good ones out there. Like there's like Phoenix Immortals Rising, I think that's the name of the game. That's like that's like tons of Greek mythology in that game. There's that Hades game. There's like there's this other game called Kina Bridge of Spirits. That's all like
Yeah, that one.
pagan and shamanistic and mystical, and there's just so many good fucking video games out right now that, like, if you're looking for, I don't know, like if you're feeling a little stagnant, maybe if you're looking for like that little spark, that mystical, that fantastical kind of thing, there's just so many good ones, and you can find a lot of that in video games. It's not always just books, that you can get that kind of
There's
that kind of thing from.
something kind of interesting that fucks me up about Hades, though. Like a while ago, there was somebody I used to be friends with who told me a god can't help but hear when you call their name. You know what I mean? So I always wonder, like, what effect it has to have a modern retelling of old mythology and have people in the modern times not just like using old school references like I don't actually know Greek mythology well enough to know where all of the stories around all the characters come from, but like where was I going with it? Right. It's iterative. It's not just like we're rehashing up the whole thing. Like Goddess Nyx, for example, is one in this where like I read that Nyx doesn't even have like a portrait or bust back in traditional Greek mythology. She was the goddess of the night, so I don't believe she was actually depicted in anything. And I read, I don't have the sources handy, that the depiction of Nyx in Hades is one of the first like mainstream depictions of her, and she looks so good. Like her hair looks like the night sky, and you can see stars flickering in it. Like there's just so many really beautiful details. It's not riffing off of the gods. It's iterative, and it's like a love letter to that culture itself. And like the whole story is around like Hades and Persephone and their kid and her departure from the underworld and the drama surrounding it. We all know the story, right?
Yeah. I am an avid reader of Lore Olympus on the Webtoon app. It's like I'm usually not a romance story person, like I'm really not, but this just it has me gripped. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's got you gripped about her?
I really like the way that Persephone is portrayed in the series. Hades too, because sometimes Hades gets a bit of a bad rep. He's so sullen and this and that, and they kind of pick on him, and that's depicted, in the series. Like Poseidon and Zeus, they're not they're not very kind to Hades, but the whole thing in Lore Olympus, I don't want to spoil too much for anyone but then again, it's a Greek myth. I mean, how much can you spoil? It's a retelling. But so basically the whole thing is
for a several thousand-year-old story.
Yeah. The whole thing that they're focusing on this is that Persephone is a fertility goddess, and there hasn't been like a fertility goddess since like the Titan era is kind of like the whole big thing. And so and then like the fact that Hades is like in Persephone, she can go like she's so powerful in this in this telling of this story that she can go like feral, kind of like she is queen, and you don't want to fuck with Persephone. I don't know. Lore Olympus is it's just such a good telling of that story, and I've kind of gravitated away from Greek mythology. We were taught a lot of it in school. It was constant, almost like every year was a new Greek myth. I've actually kind of been gravitating more toward the Nordic, I guess Germanic myths and stuff like that lately.
Me, the Roman. I've actually been studying reading about Roman paganism and studying about like Roman gods, and I've learned a lot. Firstly, I've learned that whole thing about the which I used to falsely believe as well. I think we've even joked about it on here before. The Romans did not steal their gods. It's not exactly how that happened. It was a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
and they were it was more like it was a steady process that happened over time. They
Mm.
actually had their own gods that probably came from they were already there that mimicked a lot of you see a lot of the parallel with the Etruscans who came from what we now call Turkey.
Mm.
Um, and were the people who were in charge of Etruria at that time. Now, of course, it's just all Italy. Um, and yeah, and over time, the Greek influence on Rome uh, influenced the nature of the gods and who was comparable to who. And believe it or not, it was actually really shallow. Like the
Mm.
comparability was like it was the like I found that like it's not as there's a lot deeper when you just like when you talk about the gods within cultural context like of Rome itself and not with like
Mm.
without the Greek influence. So yeah, I totally get it. I've been
So the
reading about
Romans,
Rome.
they were just able to kind of like really see the overlap and similarities between their gods and then the gods of the civilizations that they absorbed, I guess.
That surrounded them because like
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean you should actually look into Jay for you Anglo-Saxon
Mm.
like Woden and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You'll
that's
find
kind
a
of
lot
where
of the
I've been going because I'm realizing that a lot of the Celtic stuff is also very like interwoven with the Nordic Viking era. You know what I mean? Like the Germanic, because like they all kind of went across the pond right there at some point,
a
right?
lot of yeah, a lot of I think it very similarly, if not exactly in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the Celtic, the Scandinavian, the Nordic stuff, and how it influenced a lot of the Anglo-Saxon, particularly, but of
Mm-hmm.
course in general, um, the Celtic. There's a lot of there's a lot of crossover there. There's a
Yeah.
lot like even with you know, even with like the Morrigan,
Mm.
right? Um, what part what part did I cut out on? I'm sorry.
Um. Damn, I'm really trying to remember. Sorry, I was so focused on the fact that I couldn't hear you. I was like,
Oh, weird. Okay.
We were
And I
talking
wouldn't know where you
about.
dropped out because I heard the whole thing.
Well, what? Recap me. What were you saying?
So I was just saying, like you'll see a lot of like conflation, even still to this day. I was talking about how like you notice a lot of Norse people have taken to venerating the Morrigan.
Mm, yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and the Morrigan it technically is Irish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, you'll see the passing down, you know, of thought and the syncretizing, right? As it's officially called.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you'll see it a lot. It happened a lot in syncretization. What I was reading yesterday was really interesting. In the ancient world, syncretization in general of culture and belief and things like that was really normal.
Yeah.
It was really common for that to happen, even with so I was talking to Darian as well about the Greek and the Egyptian gods and how there now is like this composite gods of that are sort of part Greek, part Egyptian.
I'm trying to think in terms of historical context. Now, when Greece was at its height of its civilization, was Egypt already gone? Like Egyptian society? Like
So I
like what,
know
you know what I
that
mean? You know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, so the timelines get a little fuzzy.
Yeah, that's where it's hard for me.
I know that the problem is that we're talking about really old
Yeah.
civilizations here.
Ancient civilizations, yeah.
Right. So like the timeline for us, especially when you have memory like mine, which is basically just a sieve. Um, but I do know that the influences were like I do know that like Egypt did exist long enough for um like I said, to be venerating some of these composite Greek gods, right?
So the
So like
Greeks came before the pharaohs and like the Egyptians? possibly?
They were there. So Egypt
Or
definitely came first
simultaneously?
because
But Egypt was
the first
okay.
civilization came out of Mesopotamia. The
Okay.
first human civilization, and
That we know
civilization is
of, yeah.
right. So like civilization, just to define it, is like structured. Like they had agriculture, they had some form of politics, that kind of thing, right? So that's
Hmm.
civilization. So the first civilization came out of Mesopotamia, and then it was Egypt. Um, and then I would assume at some point, of course, in the Mediterranean, you had I know that the peoples that were there were the Greeks, the Romans, the Etruscans, and the Phoenicians.
Hmm.
Um, and they were distinct groups. But the Etruscans and the Phoenicians are pretty much, I don't know what really happened to the Phoenicians. I think either they are gone or they too got absorbed,
Hmm.
like the Etruscans did with Rome,
Right.
which is why like there's no more like Etruscan people. Like
Right.
it's everyone's just kind of Italian. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
um, because it got so blended and mixed together. But that's more proof about the syncretization.
Right.
I think we have this idea now, but I'm specifically talking about the pagan community, where we think that everything was done like with bloodshed and war,
Right.
and it was way more complicated than that. And like I don't know why we're obsessed with like every like it was done in blood, and it's like
I can
sure there was
explain
stuff
that.
done in blood, but that's such a reduction to what actually occurred. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? As far as
Hand
totality.
hand up. Can
Go
I
ahead, please.
explain why they
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
focus on the blood?
absolutely, yes.
Because it fits their narrative that ever since the beginning of time it's been people fighting other people, right?
Hmm.
Because it legitimizes the use of violence to colonize other people and take what's theirs, right? It's easy to say, oh, it's just how it's always been, things have always been that way and that's how we always do it, right? And it's like
Right.
kind of one of the most reoccurring things that is said to excuse some of the worst atrocities on the planet. So they want everything to sound like it's fucking bloodshed because that undermines people corrupting in the narrative people cooperating in the narratives that we don't have to be at fucking war with each other. It's like specifically a patriarchal thing. Anyways, go ahead, Scott.
No, I mean absolutely. And of course, like just for the viewer's sake, like just historically speaking, I'm not. Me and Sophia are not saying that war didn't occur. You know what I
Sure.
mean? But definitely, it wasn't the only thing that was happening. I
And
would. Mhm.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I would even argue that it's thanks to this syncretization that we have things like folk magic systems and folk religions throughout, cultures. Without it, that probably would have never happened. Um, and I mean, yeah, those things are really important now. For a lot of people, that's a way in. It's a way for people to come back to their roots is through something that has persisted, without having fallen, to history. And now, it's a way for us to not have to necessarily reconstruct. You know what I'm saying? It's actually something that resembles an unbroken line. You know what I mean? It's not, of course, but it remains more so than a lot of the pagan religions, or even the modern religions, which are constructing themselves as we go, right? um yeah, I think I made that point. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
What I do?
No, nothing. I was
Okay,
just
I was
trying to
like,
keep up with
what?
you. You were on such a roll there. But no, it's
I'm
it's kind of this
sorry.
idea that
You're good.
humans are much more complex, and as we've gone through in our generations, our relationships with each other just get more complex. And I don't know. It's hard. It's hard being a person. God damn it.
It is. I was just saying that.
I like being a person though. Like
Me too.
I think
I
the
accept the
hardness.
challenge, but goddamn.
I think being look, I'm a little Saturnian and a little oh, the hardships make you good sort of person. But like, I'm gonna be real.
In a way.
All of my pain has made me better. Not because of the pain, right? But because like it allowed me to empathize with other people and know what they're going through, right? Like there's just I don't know. I feel like anything that's ever set me back has also within it contained the energies to advance me beyond my wildest dreams, right? And it usually seems to be like how I meet those challenges, right?
Right.
I don't know, just a random thought.
Yeah.
No, I completely get it. I feel similarly. I don't, I'm not going to sit here and be like, wear my pain as like a badge. I hate that.
Yeah.
But
like I don't make it my personality,
I also don't think
Right.
it should be armor either, though. Pain shouldn't be a
Right.
badge or an armor. Pain is pain, and you can make something out of it, but it isn't
Yeah.
intrinsically one thing,
Yep. Yes, absolutely. And I try to acknowledge that. That's actually something you learn in therapy too, is sort of how to you exist with pain. After a while, you start to realize that pain is something that happens to you, and you have to learn how do I put this? You have to sort of picture it like really harsh waves, but those waves can only hurt you when you're all tense and you're all like when the more it hurts you more when you're not letting the waves pass over you. When you're trying to like, it almost is different. When you're trying to brace yourself, it's going to whiplash you. But when you soften, you get to just sort of move,
Oh, it's like getting in a car accident. If you fight it, you're gonna get hurt more.
Yeah,
But if you just
exactly.
goes fucking seriously, if you just go spaghetti limp when you hit, you're totally a lot better off. Like I got in a car accident and we hit a rock V ditch and did like a full 360 and actually an extra 180 because we ended up ass end out. And I was fine. And the guy who was with me was a little whiplashed because he was trying to fight the whole time, and I was just fucking ragdolling like Raggedy Ann over there.
That's it's a very dark, but very apt.
I don't know. I mean, we started talking about the underworld in the start of the episode. So is this like the Thonic episode or something where we talk about the benefits of negativity or something? I don't know.
It could be.
I mean, yeah. There's
That's
I know better than to think that our episodes even have an overarching theme so much as we just like randomly schizo shit post whatever's on our mind at the moment.
Yeah, the theme develops as we go, and when I go to edit and post it, then I'm like, oh, I guess we talked about this. And then I give it a title.
That's what it was about. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, us.
And then sometimes when I listen to it again, I'm like, oh, damn, listen to us. We're like professionals. Like, we know what we're doing, right? And then sometimes and then sometimes there's like big gaps of silence, and I'm like, edit that out, and So for anyone watching live, well, we're doing it live, so that's what you get. But if you listen to the
too bad. No.
recorded, uploaded version, I do edit the not good stuff.
I mean, I do feel like there's a message in there, though. Like, we do live in such fucking trying times right now, right? Like,
I'm trying.
The world's on fire. How about yours?
Yeah, like, I say this a lot. I am a person that if I see a problem in the world at large, in my friend circle, whatever, if I see a problem, an inequality, something that's bad, like, I immediately feel like it is my duty and responsibility to fucking fix it. And I realize that's like, it's unrealistic for me to be like, I can solve every problem. It's totally unrealistic. But it is really hard for me to control my brain and be like, okay, calm down. You cannot single-handedly stop the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Like,
oh, of course.
Like, relax. So I saw this post on Threads. I think the username was Tiff's a Witch. And they posted something really kind of prominent. It was like, they were talking about like the most recent full moon that we had, and it was like, listen, if you didn't do some big elaborate ritual for the full moon, if you didn't charge your crystals or whatever the hell the thing was, fucking relax, because like magic is still magic. Like spirit wants you to move with it, kind of thing, and not like force yourself to engage in spiritual activities. That's kind of silly. Like that full moon magic, that energy is still there. You know what I'm saying? Like even just something as sitting on your porch looking at the moon, that could probably be more
Mhm.
powerful than, like you're looking at the moon meditating, whatever kind of thoughts may come to you. That could be a more powerful magic than, doing some elaborate ritual kind of thing.
Well, like,
I
what's the elaborate ritual even for? That's the
Right,
question, right?
right.
Like, what are you trying to do with it? Scott, what were you gonna say?
I was actually it's funny that we're talking about full moons, and this directly relates. The last, not the yesterday,
Mm,
or not Thursday.
mm,
Maybe that was a full moon. The full moon last month. Um, I had made a post on my Instagram about how, I enjoy these complex rituals, and bringing in many tools and herbal allies and stuff, and I enjoy all that. But I was saying how sometimes a sincere heart, a still mind, um, and I don't remember the third thing it said, reverence or something like that, is more than enough. Um, and I went outside on my front stoop because I really don't care. I love the, people staring at me and be like, what the hell is that? I don't really care about that anymore. So I just do magic in front of people. Like, but I had like my black book. I had incense. I had my silver pentacle that I charge under the moon, and I said this. I said a classical prayer to Diana, and it was really really powerful. I just sat down. I didn't do much of anything, and I just looked at the moon. I meditated. I contemplated. I centered myself, and I pulled the moon down into my jewelry to impregnate the silver with lunar light. It worked really well. I felt Diana's presence, and that was super effective for something so simple, so easy. Um, and also too, it was actually the disseminating moon, so it was I didn't get to it till the night after. So like when the full moon was like in like
Oh
97%
yeah.
going to
mm,
decrease. And a lot of people don't do magic on the disseminating moon.
mm,
Um, I didn't used to when I was younger because I used to follow that school of thought where if you did something, your magic would be weird or whatever. And I thought
mm,
that was true, but now I'm kind of like, probably not. So it
Yeah.
definitely isn't true per my experience. So it's
mm.
not true for me, I should say. Um, and yeah, I think it's funny that you were mentioning the full moon energy being there all the time. It reminded me of something that me and Darian were talking about. Darian and I are getting into like this whole magical experimenting thing, like doing
Ooh.
like experiments with magic to see if we could even just make it work.
And like sort of like
I was,
following scientific method, sort of.
yeah,
Mm.
seeing how we feel about it, mapping out day and hours and stuff, which is,
Mm.
we're doing our, like, we're putting our occultist hat on, you know what I mean?
That sounds like
And
fun.
I wanted to try. I wanted to put some money out there and get a sphere of rainbow moonstone.
Mm.
And I said, what if we did ritual transmutation of a sphere of moonstone into the moon itself?
Mm. Okay.
Like, what if we did something, sort of worked the moonstone over time, and sort of, very similar to this is the body of Christ, but this is the moon herself, this is the body of the
Oh.
moon, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And did
That
that.
has some potency.
Right? It was just
That's
an
an
idea. I
interesting,
mean, I don't,
yeah.
I have no clue how I'm going to make it work, but me and Darian want to do it.
Just like
Um,
I have a pair of they're not quite binoculars. I think they're like opera glasses kind of things.
ooh,
Those are like fancy
yeah.
looking binoculars and they're kind of silvery looking. I actually looked up. They were actually made in Japan. I think like during World War II era, I believe. But when I initially found them at the flea market, my first thought was you can use them to see spirits. Like that was my thought. That was what popped into my head. I just felt like I was like I can enchant those to see spirits. So that's like one of my projects. So I have a little project
See, you have an
going
experiment
on.
too.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. I'm noticing a new trend where people are starting to want to experiment with magic, which I think is really cool.
Yes, please experiment with magic. Magic is not. This is something that I was sort of falling. I was falling too hard into the. You gotta do magic every day. You gotta, do big elaborate things. You gotta meditate. You have to be perfect, right? And there is no such thing as perfection at all. Like there's just no such thing as perfection. And so what I've just been trying to do is I've just been trying to lean into wherever my mind is taking me, wherever my body is taking me, wherever spirit is kind of taking me. You know what I mean? Like, okay, here I am right now. What can I get accomplished? What do I have the energy to do? What am I feeling? Because another part of that Threads post that I was referencing earlier was she was talking about like how capitalism, like that 9 to 5, that the work day, the grind, it takes up so much of your energy and it takes up so much of you. It's just so much of your time and your energy is devoted to something that is not nurturing for your soul. And so to make that, when our society prioritizes work and self-sacrifice over spiritual connection and fulfillment, then there's such a disconnect in the person. And it's hard. It's hard to make yourself understand that the spiritual is actually more important. But it's also like, but I have to survive in capitalism,
I wouldn't say they're more important, but I'd say they're all equally important, right? Like, here's the thing. If you neglect your body and you fail to eat, you're going to die, right? If you fail the social body, you're going to get ostracized and you're going to die of loneliness, right? If you fail your spiritual body, the results are not always immediately visible, right? Like, I've met a lot of people.
Like spiritual sickness is, it's long lasting. It's very it's different.
It depends on the individual's spiritual sickness. I've never actually healed a spiritual sickness myself, so I'm not going to say that I know the extent with which they differ. But like the point that I'm kind of circling my way around to is like all of our bodies are equally important, right? I wouldn't say the spiritual is more important, but it has the same level of seriousness, right? Like I know specific events that I'm not going to reference in my own personal life, but I've seen the results of people who know better with spiritual practices and like what they should be doing, like literally having the fucking teachings to do it and choosing not to do it and literally watching shit just fall the fuck apart. And in the inverse, I've seen people who didn't necessarily know what they were doing, but followed the instructions of somebody who has practice and knowledge, and they got the results they needed, and everybody benefited, right? There's a very real relationship between these little spiritual practices that our ancestors, wherever you come from, your ancestors will have a spiritual practice that's relevant to them. And when you partake in it in the proper way, you get a lot of positive benefits, right? And I don't want to just like say it specifically ancestor worship, right? But I'm trying to be really broad here because there's so many different practices, right? That I can't really speak to all of them without trying to speak to some, right? So I'm trying to be really non-specific. But like if you know that you should be doing something like putting down an offering, let's use a very basic one. Let's say I'm going to trip on mushrooms. I know from what I've learned with my spirits, I'm supposed to put down an offering when I do that. Whether it's throwing 3 pennies into the water, which is what one spirit I have a deal with really likes it when I do. And the times where I don't, and I know better, it's not a good time. It's not a good, like, it's very real, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic about it, but like, I'm serious. If you actually know the repercussions and like someone sat you down and taught you it, I promise you those fucking repercussions are going to happen if they've been named, whatever they are in any given situation. Be very fucking careful, right? It's also this weird thing too where I always state, like, if you know better you have to do better. There's almost like a layer of, if you're not aware about it, there's grace given, right? The
Right, yeah.
same way that you don't expect an infant child to know how a stove works, you keep them away from it, right? But if you see somebody who's already like cooking shit as an adult, and they go and put their hand on an element just to rest it on there, which no sensible adult would ever do, you're gonna eventually catch a repercussion from that. You see what I'm
Right.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like a physical one, right? So you can't always physically see when something's hot, right? You can feel with it. You can feel it's hot if you're careful, but caution has to be learned, right? And just the same way, that element isn't always going to be hot to burn your hand. Spiritual mistakes aren't always going to kick you in the ass, right? But even if
Yeah.
you don't know better, you do it long enough and you will catch a repercussion, I promise you.
Yeah.
Like,
Me and Darian, I don't know. I don't know how
I was
much
gonna
of
say, I think you have something to say. Go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
No, I said I feel like you have something to say, so please go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. I was like, no, me and Darian had a experience recently, where I got really curious. And FDR Park, it's a pretty the lakes here in Philadelphia. Um, and there was this area in there that really unassuming. It's just this really old, like, cabana looking area, and it's clearly like falling apart. There's a few like two old picnic benches and this cabana looking area with there's like these bamboo this old bamboo wind chime thing. It's all tangled. And we were there like a couple weeks before, and I was like, oh, I really want to go over there. And Darren was like, babe, leave it alone. Because he felt it too. Like, there's that pull. And I was like, oh, there's something over there. I want to go say hi. And Darren's like, no, just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. And he was right. He was right. And then we went
Yeah.
back again. This was like a week ago, something like that. And I went over there. And it was really eerie because the sun was shining and everything else. And there was some clouds in the sky and whatever, but as I got closer to the area, I noticed that like the sky was getting darker and it was getting gloomier.
Oh.
That bluish tint started coming over the park, and I was like, oh. And as I'm getting closer to the area, and I could feel what's there. I remember I felt spider webs on my hand, like kind of on my hand and sort of up my forearm. And I quickly like moved my hand and I went like this, but there was nothing there. But it was a whole lot of spider web. It would have been connected to my hairs, it would have been there.
Yeah.
And I looked and I was like, you know what? No. I was like, I could tell there's something in here, but I couldn't pick up on what it was. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry I entered your space. I was just curious. And I left. And the other night, it was the strangest thing. Dara and I were sitting in the kitchen, and have you ever had a moment? I feel like all practitioners do when you're just somewhere. You could be doing anything, literally completely unrelated to anything spiritual, and all of a sudden it feels like that feeling you get when a sound stops somewhere in the house, and you just like
everything
time
goes
just changed.
quiet. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's a phrase for it. I can't remember where I grew up. I maybe not a phrase, but like an explanation for it. I'm not gonna throw offhand, but like it's like the air gets sucked out of a room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And I said to Daria, I was like, it was like a balloon just popped in the middle of the room, but it was really strange.
Mm.
And me and him both reacted to it at the same time, and I was like, that was weird. He goes, yeah, I don't know what that was. And to make a very long story short, we encountered, it wasn't really long, it's just complicated.
Mm.
There was we ended up encountering what was at that place. Me and him both started seeing very similar things. I was like, it looks like a large furry dog, like a white dog.
Interesting.
And I said, and I said it had blood dripping from its mouth and it looked like a white dog. But it
Well.
was weird because Darian picked up on what I was really interested in was how Darian picked up on the white fur. He didn't say dog, he said white fur. And then he also hit the blood just like I did, which
Mm.
was an interesting that's two hits that we both got separately, so that was really interesting.
Mm.
And although he didn't see it the way I saw it, he saw it a little bit different, but like where the blood was.
Of course.
But still the blood was there. And it was interesting what I didn't and then we're trying to deal with that, right? Like we're trying to like see what's wrong with it. Darian was like, is this an animal spirit that just, found its way here?
Mm.
Darian was like, maybe it's an injured animal spirit.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, it doesn't feel like that. I felt animal spirits before. Um, and we're like trying to deal with it. And I keep getting these like impressions of like, when dogs are trying to intimidate you, like
Mm.
before they attack.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Just
And
telling this story, my whole response is like, "Get out of there! What are you doing?"
and I'm kind of like, and like, I'm trying to like push back. I'm like, I'm like picturing my bubble, and I'm trying to figure out what's happening because it happened out of nowhere and it felt really weird. I couldn't
Mm.
figure out where this is coming from. My words are perfect, so I couldn't figure out what was wrong. My words weren't broken, so I was like, I don't know what's happening. And I started to remember about uh the relationship between like yith hounds or yell hounds in Appalachia, fairy hounds, and the relationship to hellhounds. And they're all the folklorically they're the same thing. And what was weird is that I had heard this the night before. I had heard when I was downstairs on my computer late, everyone was asleep. I had heard this strange yowling. It was like if you ever heard like
Mm.
well, Sophia, you lived on which is essentially a farm area. You know what it
Well,
sounds like
my
when the dogs
grandparents had a farm that I spent lots of
well,
time on. I wouldn't say I lived on it, but yes, I've been on a
rurally, you
farm
know what
a
I
fair
mean. You
amount.
spent time rurally,
Of
right?
course. And my
Like
hometown's
when
fairly rural.
yeah, so you know what it's like when there's like animals yowl. You know what I mean? It's
Oh
somewhere
yeah.
between like a howl and a yapping.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I heard that, but it was weird because when I heard it, it sounded as if it was both far away and really close, and I tend to know what
Mm.
that means.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go upstairs. I don't want to be alone because it felt really intimidating. And that was the night before this occurred. And then what was weird is while we're handling that, Darren was like, I'll be right back. I really got to use the bathroom. He's like, just please don't keep engaging it. I'm not here with you. I was like, I'm fine, whatever. As Darian's in the bathroom doing his business, mom and I both now my mom's in her room, I'm downstairs. My mom hears the yowling and we both hear it at the same time.
Mm.
And she goes she texts me, I think, and she goes, "What was that?" And I was like, at this point I'm putting two and two together, I'm doing research, and I'm getting upset because I don't know if you know anything about yith hounds or hellhounds
Mm-mm.
or things like
Not
that.
a damn thing.
So they
And it wasn't like a
often
cat in like one of the
no, it
strays or anything.
wasn't. I know what you're thinking. It really
Yeah.
wasn't a cat. It was dog-like. It wasn't a cat like wow 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 wow. It
Yeah.
wasn't like that. It wasn't that at all. Um because my mom has heard that, she's in the
Yeah.
back room. It wasn't that at all.
Yeah, because 'tis the season.
Yeah. And I started like going off about how, hounds are signs of death, and given that my partner's sick and all this other
Mm.
stuff, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like going crazy because they're really ill omens of like ill fortune and sickness and death.
Yeah,
And
you're
I'm
like,
like, what did I do? Like, how did this happen? Because normally I'm pretty safe from fairy shenanigans, right?
mm.
Um,
Do you think that's
and
what
then,
was the thing that you picked up at FDR?
yep, I think that this was just a place where it decided to lay its head. I think it was like people might think it's silly, but the fact of the matter is that and I've said this on here before, and I'll stick to it, is that spirits will migrate with the belief in them, and when people move, they'll move,
Mm.
and there's no fairy mounds here, right?
Right.
So they're gonna go to our wild places. They're gonna go to the places that are symbolically and archetypically similar. They're gonna go to fairgrounds. They're gonna go to places where there's festivals, where there's this sort of liminality between nature and people, and coming together and then leave. Like, they're gonna go to those places. That's where they're gonna go.
Yeah.
And sure, that's UPG. Take it or leave it. I don't care. Um, but in my experience, that's how it's been. Always. I've experienced the spirit world that way my entire life. And inevitably, to get to it, we ended up having to, I realized very simply, I was like, how do you protect yourself from a youth hound? Thankfully, it was pretty simple. Me and Darian turned our shirts inside out and put them back on. And then to protect ourselves from it. But I didn't just want to like shoo it off, because clearly I offended it. And
Yeah.
I was like, I said, I'm gonna give it an offering, and I was like, I'm such an idiot. And I get the honey, and Darian goes, "Oh, we're such idiots." And he goes, "I'll get the milk." And we gave it sweetened honey milk
Mm.
as an offering, and literally the whole environment just settled instantaneously. I offered it honey milk, and it just all disappeared. So
What we've
yeah,
learned here
sorry.
is that the spirits are hangry. Um.
Don't like Sophia said,
You know,
don't the taboos, those old taboos are real.
that's a reoccurring theme I keep saying right now. And even without getting in specifics, I can say if you have a practice that involves feeding spirits, and they're either showing up, which signifies it, or you have to do it on regular, feed your damn spirits.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say
That
too,
goes
though.
for me too. God damn it.
I will say that like there are like the spirits that you have a long relationship with tend to be a bit more forgiving. Um, I apologize about the background noise. Um,
I have background noise too, so I was just making sure. I was like, what am I hearing? I have noise canceling headphones on, so I hear this
yeah, I
faint
apologize.
noise.
What do you hear?
One of my neighbors. It's a holiday weekend, so everyone's out drilling and sawing and yard
Well, Discord
projecting.
has good noise canceling because I can't hear anything on Scott's end and I can't hear
Oh,
anything
okay,
on
good.
Jay's end.
I didn't want to hear.
Perfect.
No, Christian's getting himself some.
Can you hear anything on mine?
No.
No,
Like
No.
any
no, not at
random
all.
shit? Cool.
But no, the spirit, like I was saying, the spirits you have a long history with and a good relationship with, they tend to be much more forgiving as well. Like when it comes to, I know being when it comes to like my mental health and working with my spirits, I have found, and people find, I've had people tell me this is a cop out. I've had people tell me you're not really working with your spirits if that's the case. I think that's a crock of shit. I think that spirits are much more aware, especially again the ones that we've worked with for a long time. And when I forget things, which I forget things a lot, I'm not like punished by them, right? Like I don't get like that sort of weird the kickback from like if like lately, for instance, I've been working with Diana and not as much with Nick Nevin, though I still honor her when I see or hear geese and things like that. Um, but I don't get like in trouble for it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I did have to like talk to Nick Nevin, like, hey, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not, leaving you. I'm just adding Diana into my practice.
Mm.
And I do have to. You should talk to your spirits when you're doing things. I like that when you're adding new spirits, venerating new spirits. Don't just drop, don't just drop in guests. Suddenly like at a shrine. Make sure that your spirits know
Because
what's
that kind
what
of
and who's
falls
who.
under, I guess that sort of falls under spirit / sort of resonance model. You know what I mean? Because like your spirits that you keep, like they may not all get along with each other. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to be careful with which ones you work. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Do
Yeah,
all of your spirits get along? I'm curious.
they
Like,
do now.
hmm.
I feel like it's funny. My spirits
Not to
never
cut
had
you
a
off,
problem.
even though I just
Mhm.
asked you a question. Ashka
Yeah.
from Discord is in the chat, and I wanted to just say hi because they said hi. So hello. Anyway,
Hi.
hi. Continue.
My spirits have never like had a problem, but once Darian moved in and I
Alert
let
them.
him set up his altar and stuff and start calling that his spirits in,
Uh,
that created some really weird tension that affected our dreams, it affected our sleep schedule, it affected a lot of stuff. We were waking up at really odd hours of the night. We would swear that like something, like there was a sound, like we would swear we heard something, and we would pop up, but everything would be fine. Like it was really weird
hmm.
until until I was like, oh, I'm like, hey, so like that's Darian's space, this is our space, you know, Darian has a right to do what he needs to do in here. We don't have a lot of room to, put this elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. And I told them, what was up. And
Mm-hmm.
then at that point, it is the job of the practitioner as well. Like when you're spirit working, you have to remember that like that relationship, as we've said before, is a two-way street. And you have to be able to work your spirits in a way to where you're like, look, like I get maybe you generally don't like this, but we have to meet in the middle somewhere. You know, maybe I won't call you when Darian's doing his thing, right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
whatever. And which is something that we do. I don't work when Darian's working.
Yeah, that would be
Um
kind of especially in such a small space like that. That could get a
right.
little crowded.
Yep, I don't work when he's working. He doesn't work when I'm working. The only thing that we will do at the same time is like veneration stuff.
Hmm.
Like I've prayed and sent incantations and things
Or like a
and burned
meditation sort
offerings.
of thing.
Yeah, like we'll do that stuff, but no actual like invocation. It just is really the vibes are really different.
Yeah.
Um, have you two ever noticed that like even amongst your own spirits that like some of their vibes are very very different? They're not the same. I don't know how like
Yes.
personality. If spirits have personality, I wonder if we feel it in their vibe.
I mean, naturally, spirits are going to be different, right?
Hmm.
You could no more expect a mountain spirit to be the same as a wind spirit, even
Yeah,
if they share similar heights.
I'm
yeah,
still developing my relationship with spirit. It's something I've talked about before on the podcast. It's one of the areas of sort of magic mystical things that is sort of the hardest for me to connect to. It's not that I disbelieve in them. It's that I don't know, I almost want to like come to me in person, you know what I mean? I want a full
They're
manifestation.
ephemeral.
Yeah. And so sometimes I
And
struggle with that, you know what I mean? Because I'm very much a
mhm.
scientific sort of minded person. But I am getting better with it because I'm opening myself up to spirit more. And I'm talking just spirit in general, not I'm not trying to reach out to anything in particular. I'm trying to let myself be spirit led. I don't know if that makes sense. But I'm sort
yeah,
of just trying
I get it.
to open myself up
You ride in
to
the synchro.
Yeah, and it's been pushing me lately into this sort of mix of Celtic and Germanic, like that whole kind of thing. Like basically, I keep coming back to Orglava, which is hilarious because I've known Rob for so long in my life, and I just feel like there's so many synchronicities. Like I got married, like our hand fasting was on like one of their sacred holy sites, and like because I know they do a lot of things over at Michelle's farm and all. So it's such a small niche like heathen tradition of heathenry, but it's actually the thing that I kind of keep finding myself coming back to. So I think I have to have a discussion with Rob at some point. And yeah, because I know because like there's the whole history with pagan pride, and Sarah, and she was involved with she was learning from Rob and his tradition and stuff. So I don't know, I it's such a personal thing, I guess, to kind of put on the podcast, but it is a huge part of my life. Everything is all kind of interconnected. So like with pagan pride, like there was a person who was involved with pagan pride, who was involved in a local heathen sort of circle. She unfortunately passed at a young age due to an illness. And when I was at the last sort of event, it was at the Halloween event when we did a haunted house, and there was actually there was a at the after hours part, all of the people had done like a seance kind of thing, and it was actually that person who was involved spoke to someone in the group and was like, hey, pass along this message to Jay, like you're doing good, I'm happy that you're involved. And I don't know, it's been a lot of synchronicities. So I guess this sort of like heathen sort of tradition, and it's something that like, because like I said before, like we were fed Greek mythology a lot in school. Like it was all Greek all the time. And we got a little bit of Norse mythology in high school, and I really latched onto that because I was like, oh, they're mortal and like they die at some point, and then like it all starts again. Like that idea of Ragnarok, and that Ragnarok is the end but also the beginning. So that also kind of like spoke to me. But that's where I am in my spiritual sort of things right now. I'm still exploring. But in terms of like what I just try and do is I try and listen to my inner voice, and especially when I know it's not necessarily me. Like sometimes like a voice will pop in my head that it's kind of my voice, right? Because it's my inner monologue, but it's not something I would say to myself, And so those are the things that make me feel like, okay, like there's a sort of like spirit thing happening right now, like I'm being told to do something or, move towards something. But that's where I am in a nutshell with my spiritual practice. Magically, I'm sound. I've got my system down, but I just kind of want to take it a step further with like gray school studies and that whole kind of nerd shit.
I don't want to like be reductive and say, oh, you always know in your heart where to go, because like honestly sometimes people don't, and that's a very real struggle, right? But like sometimes you really fucking do, and that's also pretty real too, right? Like if you really feel called to something that's like within your wheelhouse of shit that's acceptable for you to do,
like I think that's why we keep doing this podcast.
Life wants you to go.
I really think it's the weirdest thing. I think my strength in Magick is building community, and it's not something that people really think about as a magical skill. But I realize I have a lot of ties and connections to different people, right? Like different people in different realms of the sort of magical occult sphere. And with my ideas, like I am so happy with what we've built here on the podcast and like in Discord. This little thing has grown so organically, and I am like so thrilled about it. And for us in doing it in the chaotic way that we do, the fact that it's like so solid is I don't know. It really Sometimes I just have to take a minute and think about this is the 137th episode of this that we're doing.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Eventually, I feel like I want to go back and like really go through a lot of our old episodes, even though it's going to be a labor, and like cut out the shit that we don't really want or agree with now, because I feel like I've had so many conversations, because it's been how many years, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a few.
And I don't, with how the internet operates and how people move on it, like I don't always feel comfortable having all my old things I've said or thought on there, because I'm not sure how much I agree with them, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's take this example. Like, if you honestly don't look back on yourself in 5 years and cringe at some of the things you've said, have you ever really grown? True. Yeah.
Oh my
100%.
God.
Now, imagine having a
Snaps.
fucking record of that, and that is out there for everybody to go through. I'm pretty sure your views will have changed or morphed in that time, right? So I want to go ahead and say that, one, I don't necessarily explicitly agree with anything that I've said in the past. And so I guess the same for all of us too, though, right?
Yeah,
and like,
there are plenty
I don't know,
of
I'm
things.
sure I've said some fucking great things, but I'm pretty sure I've missed the mark a lot too.
I've actually thought a lot about this. I've never brought it up because I honestly didn't want to be like the only one who thought about it, because I thought like it was just trauma thing, right? It was just like,
No.
whatever. But it's funny because I've come to this place now where I agree. Like, there are parts of things that I've said in the past I'm like, oh, it's so stupid.
Yeah.
But I actually really like it, because for me, a lot of it is realizing how much I wasn't the one facing. So for me, a lot of that was like, how do I put this? Acknowledging that, like, a lot of, like, in those moments, it was alters. I realized a lot of the time there were many episodes where it was alters that were talking with limited understanding. I was the one with the understanding of magic, so there was a lot of the time where there were alters speaking. And
Gotcha.
but the thing is that now when I'm talking, I feel so much more confident, and I talk with a level of certainty that I didn't have back then, and I feel as if I am more I don't know how you would put this, put together. I
There
feel
has
like
been
I
a
am.
very discernible shift in your energy, I have noticed, post therapy, because you ended up connecting with that one therapist who's been incredible for you. And you've shifted since that, and I didn't have any other way to put it other than it's just been an incredibly positive change. But like, with talking about the DID and it being alters before, in this light, it does feel like I'm talking to like a more assembled version of you, if that's the word I use.
And I think that's because they don't face as often as they used to. They're not the, like, prime. You guys really don't talk to a little kid anymore. You're not talking to a rage-filled teenager. You're actually talking to a majorly stable human being. And in some ways, I like it now. I've come to almost appreciate the cringe and the stupid, ridiculous things that I said, and the wrong things that I've said, because they help me realize that I've come such a long way in being able to ground myself in reality. And also too, it really helped because now I have sort of, what is this, the respect of my occult peers. I have people that I admire in the occult space who are agreeing with me, who enjoy the things I say, who find that kind of thing, and that makes me feel really good. It makes me feel validated that that all this time spent, that I haven't just been, sitting and spinning my wheels, that I've actually been accomplishing something in this, in the occult space.
That's something I've been struggling
I feel
with.
that, but I don't know. At the same time, I still feel like maybe we could pluck some bad ones out.
Totally. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I'm not to tell you how to feel, by the way. I just mean for me.
Yeah. And
I
I
will say
understand
this.
100% wanting to have a benchmark of your own growth similar to a journal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm happy to go back and edit and purge and whatever. But I don't want to comb through the episodes. So,
That's the problem. Is
yeah.
there's so goddamn many, right? How do you like? You basically have to take the perspective of somebody sitting down and watching the whole show from.
Yeah. So like, I think I would
It's
hope the kind of people that we draw, like when I am listening to a podcast, you have to take it within the context of the moment that it was recorded. Like you have to look
yeah,
at
it's a
that
good point.
date. Because sometimes I'll listen to podcasts, right? Like if I'm catching up on one, especially ones, oh, what the hell, Coffee and Cauldrons. I listen to them. It's Robin Valentine and Maria the Arcane. They're fun. Their podcast, like they have specific segments. Like the moon is in the full moon of blah blah blah, so they're like current on astrological things. So like sometimes I'm listening to like an old episode but it's like this current astrological event is affecting your life, blah blah, and I'm like, oh, hang on a minute, what is the date on this episode? Like, so you have to like, when you're listening to a podcast episode, think about the date that it was recorded. Everything is within the context of that time. But yeah, if the spirit ever moved you such to look through past episodes, I'd be happy to purge and delete and edit and whatnot.
Yeah.
But to what
And
you
if
were
anybody who listens to us
Mm.
ever found some bullshit that's egregious and calls us on it, we can remove and edit that stuff. Like I said, we're not beheld to anything, and we're not
Oh my
trying to
God,
shape a
yeah.
narrative. We're just like people
Always fact
here
check.
out talking, trying to help share information that we've heard or read, and make things better for people ultimately, right? So if you even hear something that you don't like and really you don't feel like is up to par with like what we are building, then please call us on it and we will fix that and work on it, right? Because we're humans, we're not above making mistakes, but we're also committed to being better. So I think it's a really easy bar to just step right over,
Yeah, like it's
Call us
not
out
hard to
politely because
admit
we're
you're
not
wrong.
argumentative.
What'd you say, Scott?
I said, make sure you call us out politely because we're not the
Yeah.
argumentative. So there's no
Yeah, like
need
if
to
you're
be
a dick about it, I'm gonna be like, man, shut up.
And here's the thing too I want to talk about. I feel like we need to learn what I'm starting to call like olive branch discourse, right?
Yeah.
We on the internet just fucking attack other people viciously
It's
because we don't
brutal.
see them, and
Yeah.
we don't understand that that's actually a human being who more often than not is committed to growing and learning if given the chance. But if you attack them just to make them feel bad to try and evoke a form of change, then you're also partaking in the same oppressive structures by using shame to try and evoke change, right? Like sometimes somebody really does need to be shamed if their actions call for it, right? But if there's like somebody who's like willingly wanting to talk about shit and improve, and you just go and shit on that person just to be mean, that's not called for. But also at the same time, you don't owe them like I wouldn't be mean with anybody, but I also wouldn't like spare them your feelings. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Like
you need to say what you need to say, but you don't need to be vicious about it usually, right?
we
And I've
had
learned that like
an
reaching across the aisle actually does a lot of good.
Yeah. Like we had an instance on Tumblr when I was putting our community grimoire on Tumblr. It was Rue had written like something like a rewrite of a psalm, right? And then someone got offended and blah 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 blah, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And I was like, listen, this is a community grimoire. This was submitted by this, you know what I mean? Like this is not like, this is just, it is what it is. Like fucking,
I remember. It was
it
about
is
Lilith.
what it is. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was substituting Lilith for God. So I was like, listen, shut up. That's not what I said, but that was my thought.
There's a real like, it's still, I just saw another post on Tumblr about someone saying how working with Lilith is a closed practice.
Yeah, like
which I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
People look, I'm just going to say this. People who don't go through the exact same types of oppressive struggles that other people do often want to find that same oppressive struggle within their own stuff, right?
Everyone
And
wants to fight for
like
something.
Well, that too, yes. But like one form of marginalization doesn't necessarily mean that you experience other ones, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Right?
Like
Like
the trick
you
is to
don't
not.
have to have a fucking universal experience. You're not going to have a universal experience. Nobody has that,
The
right?
goal is
You're
to
gonna have
not
your
be oppressed.
experience.
That's the
And
goal.
to not oppress others is a big thing, right?
Yes.
Because like I've actually been learning a lot of what's actually holding us back from progress isn't like the structure itself, because it's always been doing that, right?
Right.
Really, it's other people failing to act in solidarity in meaningful ways,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people actually like bouncing out of solidarity as soon as they get their own rights.
Yep.
Perfect example of this, no offense, not coming for y'all, but the white cis het not het, sorry, the white cis gays, when y'all got the rights to marry, a lot of y'all completely dipped out on everybody else, right? Not saying
I
everybody did,
was just gonna say that. I was just gonna
but
Mhm.
say that.
it's the same thing. How like if I guarantee you, if white women had earned the vote, but not black women, they would have never stood in solidarity with black women getting the vote, because that's usually not how people fuck around. Because most people aren't in revolutionary change to eliminate oppression. They're in it for themselves because they
Right.
want something out of the benefit and they see it as a vehicle to get what they want, right? And that really kind of fucks everybody over in the end when you're always thinking about yourself and selling out other people to get your own
Mhm.
personal benefit. Like, how is it really that much different than what like Republican pundits do with like all their bullshit, right? You're
Right.
selling out your fellow human being and somebody who's going through stuff worse than you, who is actually your only hope of liberation, for what? Personal benefit within a system that is going to oppress you again, given its earliest opportunity. Like
Mhm.
I'm going to be real. The reason why a lot of people are wanting to be allies and not like co-conspirators or collaborators is because they're afforded benefits within white supremacy. And I want to reiterate, white supremacy isn't people running around in fucking like clan hoods. White supremacy is often very subtle and innocuous and viewpoints that people state that go unchallenged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to be out here fucking killing people or advocating for open racism to be a white supremacist motherfucker. And I think people really need to learn that, or we need to come up with another word to get it through to people who get up in their fucking feelings about it
Yeah.
when that's said, right?
And you
But
can
the
even
real
be.
revolutionary shit holding us back is people not showing up for other oppressed folks, always just thinking about themselves and not trying to eliminate oppression as a whole, right? Because I
Yep.
guarantee you, when you liberate the most oppressed of everybody, right? Because it's intersectional, right? Because if the most oppressed people are going to have all the other oppressions by proxy, you're going to make it better, right? So that's why you need to focus on like black liberation and indigenous solidarity, inland back and free Palestine, and like all of these things, because they're all the same angles of the same thing. It's the fight to remove oppression, to give us a world to live in that isn't run by fucking ghouls and literally turning us into a state of hell just for their personal fucking benefit and sustained ruling over us till the end of time, right? Do you want to sell out your descendants and everybody coming after you on this fucking planet for your own personal benefit within a system that will destroy us all? Or do you want to actually get the fuck up and do something with us for once? And that's not directed at anybody in particular. That is just like me being frustrated at the state of things right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
It is a lot
Mhm.
of that. It's a
Mic
lot
drop.
of like there's so many nonprofit groups, there's so many this, so many that, but it's like, this is the queer group and this is the black group and this is the black queer group and then this is the trans black queer group. It's
Oh,
just
those
like,
no, hear me out though. Hear me out though. Those are
mm,
okay though, because as long as they're focusing on liberating everybody, like you
but
can't
sometimes
focus
they're
on
not
black liberation without focusing on black trans liberation, right?
right,
Like
but
there's the
sometimes
same issue.
right, but a
But
lot of
also like
times
here's the thing. Let me explain
within
too.
communities they don't all agree. Just like we were talking about like
Well, because
gays and the trans community.
Right.
but people aren't monoliths, and here's the thing. Any type of ism that can be applied negatively to, like let's say racism, right? There's tons of people from every given racialized group who have internalized racism against themselves and their own stereotypes, right? Because that's how white supremacy plays everybody with the system,
It's
right?
psychological. It's insidious.
People are working on unpacking that, but we have to create space for them rather than making it about like, well, they're not doing it either. Like you got to build it and let them come, right? Like they want to do better. They just don't necessarily have the discourse all the time, right? And that's why like I spend a lot of my fucking spare time listening to Cornbread Tube, if you can't tell. And like there are people doing the work and there are people who are going to be caught up within the system. That's kind of how it goes, right? But focusing on removing oppression isn't made better by pointing the finger at the people who aren't, right? Like even though I'm kind of doing it a little bit right here, I'm doing this to signal boost to people who are already listening, because we already have the type of audience that are going to want to reach out and make the world a better place. Otherwise, the fuck are you doing on this podcast? Free Palestine, right?
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Ting says free Palestine.
Yeah. At the same time, we gotta make that, right? You don't change the world by pointing the finger at the people who are not doing the thing. You gotta make a space for them to do it and invite them in. And I know that might be fucking controversial, and that is just my solitary opinion, right? Nobody has said that to me. Or
it's the way to do it. You have to give people an opening. You have to show people that
yeah,
they are valuable, they are useful, they are good for the cause, they can help. Because a lot of people are like, I don't know, I'm not that smart, I'm not that rich, I'm not that talented, I'm just a regular person, I go to my job, like, what do you want from me? You know, a lot of people have that, and a lot of people are like, what do you want me to do? Like, that's sort of like the attitude that you get, you know, is like, hey, all these bad things are happening in the world, and people go, well, what do you want me to do about that? Like, I'm trying to,
answers.
Keep my own shit going. Yeah.
First off, you can educate yourself in your spare time, like I'm doing. Like I'm under the crisis of trying to survive as is right now. Like I'm sure y'all know how fraught my position is financially and how much I fucking work when I'm working, right? And I do labor shit. It physically and mentally exhausts me. Still making the time in my spare time to educate myself as much, to be anti-oppressive in every way that I possibly can, and make up for my shortcomings over time and improve, right? Because I'm not perfect and I will have made mistakes even today, and I will improve on that as I go, and that's the point, right? And like, first off, you got to understand it starts with you working on being better, right? We are all trying to improve. That's the big key thing. We got to give each other grace if we're trying to improve, but also we don't necessarily need to be providing space for people who are showing that they're not trying to improve as well, right? I've noticed that there's a lot of people. It is, but let me explain. I'm not saying to cut people out because that's like punitive, right? That's a very like colonized way of thinking. But if somebody is actively displaying that they're not willing to learn or do better, sometimes the only way to get them to do better is to remove them from the space, right? And it doesn't have to be permanent. And sometimes, depending on the level of harm that they have done, it does need to be permanent, right? But that's not a disinvitation from the movement, right? You can act in solidarity with people you've hurt or other marginalized people without having to be in their spaces at the same time with the people you've caused hurt, right? Like if you're on a healing journey, you will need to be in spaces with other people. Like that's how you learn to break down your biases and actually get this discourse. But at the same time, like sometimes being removed from a space is a correct approach. And I'm not against that. It just needs to be done with a delicate balance. And you usually need to look at how much harm the individual is causing versus how much they're willing to be accountable and like what their harm is doing, right? So if it's actively traumatizing people in a space, you don't owe those people they're traumatizing the space for them to get better, right? And them being removed from the space is more likely to make them realize that their actions are causing that level of harm. Then they can go on their healing journey. Don't fucking trapdoor this person, right? Don't try and like harass campaign them, right? Unless they're dedicated to showing they're they're not changing. And even then, I don't advocate for harassment campaigns because I feel like that's just people wanting to give into their pettiness and their bullying, right?
Yeah.
I think ultimately, one thing my ex taught me is the biggest red flag you can look for is how somebody treats their opposition, not necessarily their enemies, right? Because like if a Nazi came up to me with a gun, I'd have to fight him with a gun, right? That's how that works. But not everybody who comes up to me is coming at me with that level of threat, right? And my ex, the moment they saw somebody they saw as opposition, they were vicious in a level that like I probably should have caught on to quicker. But like, watch that shit. How people treat their enemies is how they'll potentially treat you, because all it takes for them to see you as an enemy is a switch in morals or positioning, right? So if anybody, if someone's treating their opposition like it's just in death time, you know, like that's a super big red flag, and you should probably steer clear of that individual in that phase of their healing journey, right? And again, don't write that person off. Like I actually no, you can write some people off depending on the level of harm that they've caused, right? If someone's out there serial killing, I don't think that we're going to reform that person. I'm sorry, right? Maybe they have a change of heart in a place where they're removed from society, but I don't think somebody who gets a thrill from that is going to stop getting a thrill from that, right? So you have to be reasonable with the levels of harm being done and how it's impacting people, because there's no clear answer, and we need to work on this shit, obviously, to get better at it, right? But as community, we can take a lot of fucking nods from the indigenous community, because like, I'll be real, they've been doing this resistance shit for a long goddamn time, and they're a lot better at it. Just saying.
Yeah.
Not that anybody in particular, other than just like leftists as a whole. Like that's not a shot at any other group, because I know there's a lot of other groups that are really good at their organizing and do phenomenal work. But as a whole, the left definitely needs to
come together,
work on themselves. Because a lot of people are here to point the finger at other people, and I think that's almost fucking useless. Unless you're using that to call in and try and change behavior exactly how I'm doing now. Because there's so much feel-good content caught up in, oh, you owned them, slam dunk the libs, you know? And it's the same shit with like the conservatives. A lot of people will go to a podcast or go to a content creator because of the level of dunk they can put on something and make them feel good about hating that thing. And that I feel like is an entirely destructive behavior, right?
It's not
like people
helpful.
should not be fucking hate engaging with shit. It is one thing to go and watch 16 videos that are 3 hours breaking down every single point why J.K. Rowling or what's his name, Jordan Peterson, why they're wrong and how to counter their discourse, because those are entirely helpful. They make you understand the flaws of those worldviews, and then you can see that rhetoric in other people and understand where it comes from and have the knowledge to mitigate it, right? That's a helpful activity. But if you're just sitting there watching people dunk on Jordan Peterson and like say, oh, this man has childhood trauma. Oh, this man doesn't have a dad. Oh, look at how he's dressed. What are you actually doing, right? You're taking supposedly revolutionary behavior, which is critiquing people in a position of power, and you're turning it into personal entertainment. And I think that's gross.
Yeah,
right?
It's just, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm gonna step off my soapbox for a second and pass the mic.
I was actually gonna say we have been going for almost an hour and a half, so we probably would want to wrap up within the next couple.
Yeah, I probably extended the podcast by a good 15 minutes with that rant.
All good. Catching up on the chat, Ashka was saying different altars for them are hooked on different practices. So I guess that's an interesting kind of thing, like different altars in your personality. If you have, that kind of personality. Is it a disorder? I hate calling things disorders.
Well,
condition?
It's a dissociative disorder. Personality disorder, class under their own. It's a dissociative disorder, but yeah.
And then we also have another person in the chat here, Woo Riders DG. Well, that's an interesting name. That's a cool name. I'll have to check out your channel. New subscriber, hello from Florida. Hello.
Oh, hi.
And then
Yo.
while you were on your little soapbox there, Sophia, Lexa was like, absolutely, say it, Sophia. Speak on it, girl. So, the chat has been very chatty today. I'm glad that some people got the memo and were able to join in on Saturday instead of Sunday, because that's
Maybe Saturdays are less busy. Maybe people are less hungover at 2 p.m. on a Sunday.
maybe. Who
Who
knows?
knows?
It's just me and Scott and Darian and Rue. We're going to a little Ren fair tomorrow. On our
Yeah.
usual recording day. So we're actually leaving the house. We're leaving our houses, and we're gonna see each other in 3D. It's gonna be crazy.
I know.
Yeah. Or
What
5D.
people who are
Coming
terminally
soon.
online might call the meat space.
Yeah, meat space. We will be in meat space. Also, pack your potential rain gear tomorrow. There's a 40% chance of rain.
Oh, okay.
Or do weather magic. I don't know. Whatever we want to do.
I was literally
Or
just
both.
gonna say,
I
or
laugh.
try to ask the weather for an exception on your circumstances.
Yeah, like, can you like push it out till later? You know?
We're a bunch of queer introverts who are trying to have a nice day.
Yeah, please. We're a bunch of indoor kids trying to do an outdoor kid activity. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, any
Holy.
concluding thoughts before we wrap up here today?
Shit on the
Uh,
patriarchy, divest from capitalism, stop funding genocide, free Palestine, also land back, like actually educate about it. Go watch a podcast. I'll put it in show notes or something. Yeah. Get involved, even if it's just educating yourself. On to Scott.
oh man. Oh, that's something I want to say. Remember to be soft in this world. Don't be rigid. Don't be hard. Try to be soft. Try to not be on the defensive all the time. You grow more when you're not all rah. When you let things come and you accept them as they are. It's not to say that you won't struggle with it, that it isn't hard. It's just about how you move through those things. You'll find it creates ease.
That is very good
Also,
advice.
one last thing. It was really interesting that I could honestly, like, whether it was archetypically, or otherwise, I could connect that all back to the theme of like the Thonic journey, the journey into the underworld. The It all kind of relates if you really think about it. The struggle, the human condition, the pain, the sorrow, the reality of impermanence. Like it all kind of this entire episode really does have
There
a
is a
deep running
theme.
theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I love it when a theme emerges, right? It's all organic here.
And actually, I'm just going to tack on really quick. Because I was talking about getting involved, I'm going to drop some videos from creators I've been watching a lot of content from lately. I find they're incredibly helpful in the current modern discourse. And if you're looking at somewhere to get involved on educating yourself, these are sources I would recommend looking into. I wouldn't like say it's a place to start, but it's something, and I hope it could lead you somewhere.
Very cool. So check out those. And if you're not in the Discord, you should be. And I think the link for all that should be like in our show notes and stuff like that. So with that,
Well, how are they going to find the Discord show notes if the link's in the show notes? You got to put it on the chat.
well, no,
Or you
in
mean
the
show?
the description on like YouTube and stuff, like for the live stream, it should all be like in there.
Okay.
Yeah, everything.
So when I say show notes, I mean our show notes channel on our Discord because I don't have the access to put it on the YouTube channel.
Yeah. I have discontinued the practice of actually putting the things like that we reference in the show. It's kind of like join the Discord, you know, if you care that deeply about the links. I'm sorry, not sorry. I can't do everything. So but yeah, with that, we are gonna log out. Gonna end the stream for today, and then we'll be back next week. I think we'll be back to Sundays as per usual, but we'll see. All right, everyone. We